Christina Romer, the former chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, and her husband, economist David Romer, have developed a new method for dating the start of financial crises. Their findings challenge the conventional wisdom that a crisis in advanced countries must be prolonged or severe. Christina Romer recently sat down with Chicago Booth to discuss why the latest crisis was so damaging.
An important part of our research is that we stopped before the recent financial crisis, precisely because we were so interested in the recent episode. We didn't want it driving all of the results because it is, a very big financial crisis. We really wanted to say, what could you have learned from what we think is the more relevant history, sort of the last 40 years, again, countries like the United States, what was the impact of crises there? When you see those results, which say, gee, it doesn't look like the effects are all that large, then you come to the most recent episode and you say, well, then why was this time so bad? And I think where our research comes in, I think probably the most straightforward thing or the easiest thing that it says is the simple explanation that, well, what we've been experiencing is just what always happens in a financial crisis doesn't seem to be true. In fact, on average, they're usually not this bad, and there's a lot of variation, so there's no such thing really as a usual. And that naturally leads you then to say, all right, well, what was special about 2008? And I think they're the things that jump to mind. One is just the financial distress was almost surely much larger than in a lot of the episodes that we'd seen before. It was more correlated across countries, right? So often Sweden would have a problem, or Japan would have a problem, or Turkey would have a problem, but it's not everybody had a problem at the same time. And when it's just one country, the rest of the world can keep growing, and maybe that helps to hold up the country that's in trouble. But if everybody's having trouble, there's nobody to hold you up. So I think that's probably the explanation that fits most into sort of what we found in the historical or the recent history. But other explanations might also be true. So many people have said, well, maybe it wasn't the financial crisis itself that mattered or what went on in the financial system. It was the fact that households were really leveraged. And when house prices fell, households got into trouble and they just responded by not spending. So maybe it leads you to look not at what went on in the financial system, but these other things maybe were the most important. And then the third, I think, is the policy response. I mean, we've seen certainly that how quickly countries deal with a financial crisis can matter a lot. But there are other policies. Did they take fiscal stimulus? Did they use monetary expansion to try to cushion the impacts? And again, something that was special about this time was that interest rates were already pretty low when the crisis started, and central banks tried to respond, but pretty quickly they brought their policy interest rates down to zero. And once they did that, there was not as much more that they could do. So that would be another natural explanation for why this time was so much worse than the recent history in countries like the countries where we had the financial crisis recently.